It's Speak It Thursday, and it's your girl Shuli. I am back for another Thursday. The conversation continues. Last week, it was a spicy conversation. We had ladies' night. We talked to some women about entanglements and relationship. It was a really fun, and I've gotten so much feedback. I knew going into it that we were going to have a part two, and we were going to have some men to come in, and then I had a shift in life. A shift hit me on Friday, and God spoke to me about being more intentional about how I approach things. And of course, this whole conversation got caught up into that intention, and I'm excited about it. So, when we talk about the male perspective, right, it's important. Most women want to know the heart of a mind. Have you ever been with your boo, your bae, your honeydew, and ask the question, what's on your mind? What are you thinking? And maybe they said nothing and you felt like there was something because they were quiet and that kind of thing. Or you just wondered, how can you better navigate relationships if you're black and single? Because that's what this is about. The black and single edition. We have women who are 30 plus, 40 plus that are still out there dating. They're newly single. They've been married. They're divorced. They've never been married. And this conversation always comes up. So tune in, share with your friends because they need to hear this conversation. And even if you're married, we're single because single means wholeness. So bring your spouse. And that it's a great conversation starter, right? To talk about relationships. So come on in, take your virtual seat, and I'm getting ready to bring my guest in now. My guest for tonight, you might have seen him before if you tuned in at the beginning of the pandemic when I did the show on Healing Us. It is Mr. Michael Dangerfield of All In Therapy and Wellness. He is an LPC. And of course, when you see, you'll know that he's a man. So we have a professional aspect and we also have the personal aspect. So without further ado, drum roll, please. And when you tune in, make sure you give him a round of applause. Welcome, Mike Dangerfield. How
What's
are
going on? What's going on, Shirley? What's going on, everybody?
you? Hey, it's Thursday. We are live. We're
Yeah.
here. All is well in my book. So tell me, how's it? How are things going with you and your practice during this pandemic?
Oh, it is very interesting. Shirley, just making a connection. I specialize in working with men in therapy, and that's a challenge in itself just because men folk, we're not talking. But coincidentally, uh, all it takes is a pandemic and people losing jobs and men being challenged to their core to say, you know what? I need to go and talk to somebody. As a result, things have ramped up for me dramatically since COVID has happened. And even though I'm
Oh,
not seeing people face to face, in office, this virtual thing, especially for us, it's working out well because that's how we communicate
yeah.
at times. Yeah.
All right. So as we get into the communication, you're already starting this up, and I'm ready because are you ready to go deep tonight? Because we got
Let's
some
do it.
things to talk
Deep
about.
is the
Okay.
only way I know how to do it, Shirley.
All right. That's good. That's what I love to hear. So, for all of you that are coming in, go ahead and drop your city. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Again, we have Mike Dangerfield, and those for you who are tuning in on HOH 77.7, welcome. We already know it's already in you, and we are about to just jump right on in. So,
Let's
speaking
do
of
it.
this, like you said, with the pandemic, and you are seeing men, and communication is important, are you seeing an uptick in men wanting to talk about relationships and how things are going on in their homes?
Absolutely, absolutely. You've probably heard it said, Shirley, and everybody who's watching. There's been a rise in domestic violence, rise in child abuse, also a rise in unemployment, and all these different things, right? And
Mm-hmm.
at the core of all of that is a man sometimes who, is trying to figure this thing out, whose worth is tied up into, being able to get outside the house or being able to go out and work. And, when that's not an option and you're forced to have to deal with things, but you don't really know how to deal with things. That's a recipe for disaster. So as a result, either some of them have been brave enough and just reached out to me because they see me do stuff on Facebook or Instagram, just little snippets, or here's the women folk who are very smart. Will maybe give them a little ultimatum or give them a nudge and say, hey, you need to go talk to somebody. And if you don't talk to somebody, we're gonna have some further problems. So they'll reach out to me, or their women, the women in their lives will reach out to me with their permission, and then we'll set something up.
Okay. Why do you think it's tough for men to seek outside support and help, especially as it relates to their relationships?
Because it goes against almost everything that a man has been taught for the most part, growing up, which is, you deal with your problems on your own. You have to be the problem solver. You have to have your game face on at all times. You can't let anything, like cause you to stumble or fall. And the reality is even though that's what we try to do on the outside, having the game face is one thing, but on the inside, you got, tons of things going on. You know, questioning whether you're adequate enough, questioning, like, are you going to succeed? Are you going to fail? All this pressure, everybody, all this weight is on you, right? And so that's enough, at a point to where a man has to make a decision. Okay, do I sit here and realize that I can't handle all this on my own, and I crash and burn, or let me take a lifeline. I see this Red Cross boat passing by. Let me shoot a flare or something and say, hey, like, it's time.
Okay.
I'm drowning.
Uh, Well, I'm glad that they have you. And I want to talk about, of course, the professional side, but we're going to set our intention here tonight. Our intention for this episode is to go deep. As I see people coming in, go ahead and drop your city and get ready. We're going to go deep, and we're going to talk to Mike. He said he is ready. We want to go inside the mind and the heart of a man. And this is a man who has done his work, and he's helping men do their work. Now, what we are not doing is trying to have Mike Dangerfield speak for all men, right? But
Absolutely, absolutely.
we're going to talk about things that impact the men around us. And hopefully we can get some help for women, like how we can support and get some answers for some of our questions, and then promote healing. We got to come together. Black love is power,
Hmm.
and we just need it. So, with that said, you have the men coming in, but let's talk about you. So, what, in your opinion, what defines a man?
Oh, what defines a man? I think
Mm-hmm.
everything we're going to be talking about tonight, being a man is about the heart and the courage to be able to be honest, to be vulnerable, to say what it is that you feel, regardless of what the perceptions and perspectives of other people are. And just being able to have a set of core values and stick to that, have integrity, be a provider, but understand what providing means, not just about, bringing home money and paying bills, right?
Yeah, what does providing mean? Tell us about that.
Okay. So culturally, we've been taught that providing means you go out there, you get a job, maintain a job, get two jobs if you have to make sure that the bills are paid, and that the family, or the family is taken care of in terms of material needs. But in this day and age where we see, the youth especially is struggling with mental health challenges, we got to go back and understand that providing is not just about, bringing home the bacon, or keeping the lights on. Providing is about presence, and not just being present, but being, involved, being in the home, being seen, but being involved, being
Hmm.
included, being part of the conversation, being able to uplift your family, your friends, your loved ones, and not just have your worth and value tied to how much money you're making and what kind of material things that you have, or how we look in comparison to the next group, family, person, whatever.
Has that ever been a problem for you in terms of getting those things confused in your youth? Was there a time when the Mike Dangerfield that we see now that is helping other men, that he struggled in that area, like providing, being a manhood, even messing up in
Mm.
relationships?
Yeah, so from the providing sense, I would say no. I was fortunate enough, and some people might not consider this fortunate, but I was fortunate enough to be born in a family where I'm the youngest of six, and my mom, for the most part, had to hold everything down. And a lot of what I had was not mine. It was passed down, right? So I never really had the luxury of, you know, showing up and stunting and all that kind of stuff, having the sauce or having swag, whatever everybody's saying nowadays. But so I always kind of had this humble mindset, like, the clothes and what you see on the outside is not what makes me, I'm going to try to invest and educate myself and understand, and that's a challenge when you grow up in the hood,
Mm.
and our way of elevating ourselves is by looking better than everybody else. So that was not one area that I struggled in. But as I got older, fresh out of high school, surely pretty much I went into the military, and so a lot of what I learned in terms of manhood and figuring out, discipline and all that kind of stuff, it was this combination of what I had learned growing up, what I seen, having a dad there, but who was not necessarily present, seeing men involved, having older brothers, seeing how relationships go, and then going into this military where everything was structured, like real tight. And then one thing that the military taught me, they said outright in the beginning that, if it's not something that we issue to you as standard gear in your seat bag, it's not important. So I had to find myself, develop my own core values, and at the end of it all, figure out who I wanted to be, So all these things were always in my mind.
Okay, so then we have somebody from the audience. We have our Amy Taylor. She's tuning in from Houston, Texas. She said that responsibility defines a man. And now that's from a woman's perspective.
Mhm.
And as we're here to talk about that, right? This is the male perspective. As women, we think that responsibility is what defines a man. But then when you're coming up, to you, is that different? How much do you feel like what we think? So, well, let's do this. Let's just jump
Okay.
into expectations, right?
Okay.
Because we're talking about this. So we have expectations of women and what we think defines a man and what we say a man is and what we expect when they're dating and courting. Can you
Mhm.
talk about like the reality of that versus like our expectations? How much of that is real?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Amy, for dropping that. Responsibility is big, even into adulthood for a man. That's huge. But along the lines of what Shuli is saying as well, there's a discrepancy in what our expectations are as men and women who are adults. Um, when you look back at what was instilled in us as adolescent youth and boys and girls. So for a boy, your typical boy growing up, he's given the space and the freedom to kind of go out and play. He's into sports, he's into, whatever it is you need to figure it out, go and figure it out. He doesn't have a leash on him so much. And what happens is the idea of maturity, is not given in terms of responsibility in a home environment, chores and what being present looks like. The idea of responsibility comes in on the football field or the basketball court, And so he's looking at his peers, learning how to be a good teammate and all this kind of stuff, not necessarily life lessons and what being a man and a provider and all that means, right? On the flip side, a girl is protected in a sense. She is almost kept on a leash, and of course, this is from a male's perspective. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but she's almost protected in that she's forced to be more responsible. She doesn't have a choice to not be successful in school. She better not come home pregnant. Like those things are kind of driven early on. And I have two daughters, surely, so I can tell you I'm mindful of that as well. But what happens then, and women say it all the time, they mature faster than men, and it's because they learn early on that here's almost this straight and narrow in order to be disciplined. Whereas young men typically have to grow up, after the hoop dreams are gone, or the glory days in sports wear off when they didn't make it to the NBA or NFL or whatever the case is, and now they have to try to figure out life. What does life look like getting a real job? What does life look like, taking care of children, being a provider for a home, being a husband, like that's a totally different thing. A girl has almost a decade, probably if not more, of experience and understanding. Like if I'm gonna be successful, this is what this needs to look like. So responsibility looks very different for a boy, an adolescent male, than it does as a man who's leading a family, who's a good husband, a good provider, a good role model, mentor, example, and all that. Right.
And you talked about responsibility and community and all of that, but what about responsibility with a woman's heart?
And so
Mm.
when you don't have one, when you don't have fathers who are present, and then two, you have fathers who are present but are not involved, you don't know what that looks like. You don't have a constant example. You're not fed into, how fragile a woman's heart is. How to appeal to the emotional side of a woman. How to understand your own emotions, because you're taught not to even, you don't show emotions. You just, you lead them, bottle them up somewhere, take it out on the field. You don't really deal with them. So all of that works against men typically, as we come up and then start this whole dating and relationship thing and understanding what it looks like from a healthy perspective.
Yeah, and then when you are brought up with that, like you said, you're on the field, you're taught to be strong, let's hit, let's tackle, we can fight, we can never let them see you sweat. Like all of
Right.
the things that you want to think of that talks about a man being strong, a man being a provider, being responsible to his homeboys, being responsible on the field, being a good citizen, holding a job. So I know you talk about being like the strong man fallacy. What's
Gotcha.
what's the fallacy about that? Is it that men are not expected to be strong? Is that what you're saying?
No,
Or they are?
the fallacy is it's being weak, it's being vulnerable, it's exposing yourself that really speaks strength. It's not what we've been taught, where you hold it down. Like if you're injured, you don't let anybody know you're injured. You keep pushing through, and will likely do more damage to yourself. But then when you get in a relationship, Shuli, and a woman asks the question, what's on your mind? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? And the natural instinct has been, man, you push through injury. You don't let anybody see you vulnerable. You don't use that as an opportunity, allow that to be an opportunity for somebody to attack you. When it's the woman who really maybe wants to support, wants to be there to help. So the fallacy
So
is,
then how,
mhm.
when it comes down to that, like you said, how does a man not feel attacked and then actually feel supportive? Like what can we do as women when that comes
Oh,
down to it? Because I mean, I've been in that situation where you wonder, you're like, I tread lightly. You hear when a man is
mhm.
quiet, kind of like let them do their thing. And I think that's why I wanted to have you on. I didn't want to have like a lot of chatter, but I wanted to be able to be like, bam, these are questions that women have
Yeah, yeah.
if we want to be better, because as women, we're reading these books and all of this kind of stuff. We might go to our classes at church. We might take a workshop. We're talking to our girlfriends. But if men are taught to push through and I don't have, I'm just going to work through it myself, there's a gap there. So then what do we do? And then what can y'all do to help us
Right.
help you?
Well, so the biggest thing I will say, and there's probably a laundry list of things that can be done. And like you said, I can't speak for all men, but I can speak generally. There's a few different things that can be done. So one thing I would say from a woman's perspective and dealing with a man who's going through something is not to make any assumptions. Not to make any assumptions about what's going on, what he's dealing with. And really just be direct and open and honest in communication. So if a man is struggling, you see he's going through something, and you're trying to engage him in conversation, that's not the time to berate him or beat him up if he doesn't respond to you the way you want him to respond. The biggest thing for a man who's wounded and is trying not to show he's wounded is to have support. So knowing your man, knowing his tendencies and how you can best connect with him in a supportive manner is the best thing. Maybe saying to him, "Hey, it's clear to me that you're going through something right now. I know you probably need your space to deal with it, but I want you to know that I'm here and I got your back, and let's work through this thing together. I'm team you, and we're gonna work through this." Being reminded of those types of things can go a long way, to helping him feel more comfortable. and
Mhm.
opening up, especially when he doesn't know how to do that. So then when he does open up, or when he does open the door to start, speaking, then the other part is the things that comes out his mouth may not feel good or sound good. They might be raw, but that's not an opportunity to now turn that on him
Mm.
and say, it's your fault or whatever the case is, because then that's going to just close that door again. So there's some
Mm.
patience. There's men having to be brave enough to be vulnerable and trust, that the women they with support them. But then the women have to understand too that, if you allow a man to be vulnerable and open himself up without fear of being judged or looked at as weak,
Mm.
then it goes a long way to help, the relationship, communication, support, all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what do you think causes a man to shut down? I don't even know if it's a what do you think, but what have you experienced? Are the things that would cause a man to shut down and just go inward to that degree?
I can probably speak from that personally, but most men, if they are in a situation where they're trying to be a good provider, they're trying to do the best that they can, that they know how, and they're constantly met with pressure, that suggests either indirectly or directly that they're not good enough, that they're not doing a good enough job, that there's more that they can be doing, that they're sorry or whatever the case is, that'll be something that'll cause a man to just stay inside of his head and just coil up, and that can be a self-destructive pattern for a man who's really trying to do right, or trying to do his best, and it's not being well received.
So then, as we're going deep. So let's talk about your personal experience. So, of the things that
Mhm.
you said, is that true for you? Like, what causes you to shut down? As you speak specifically, like you said.
So for me, I would say that was probably greater in the earlier years of my marriage, my relationship. Me and my wife are almost 13 years in a couple of months. Um, Early on, that was me. So like I said, I came up in an environment where I saw mom holding it down, dad was present but not necessarily involved, so to speak. And so, trying to figure out how to do this thing called marriage and do it right, because I always wanted a healthy marriage, and all the things I saw and I learned growing up, I'm trying to implement them. The stuff that was bad, I was like, I'm not doing that. The stuff that was good, I took it to the 10th level, But for some reason, I'm trying this, and I was met with opposition from my wife, who was a very independent, woman taking care of business on her own before I even came into her life,
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of had this traditional kind of mindset that, like, hey, if you don't want to work, you don't have to work. I'm gonna do whatever I need to do to hold it down for the family. And it was more like for her, like I came into this thing, um, on equal footing, if not in a better situation. Like I'm not just going to fall back and like not do nothing. So it was those types of things that I had to work through, and say, hey, being a man is not about making more money than my wife, which she made more money than I did for more than half of the marriage, if not more than that, But I think she will agree that the value, though, that I brought to the family was you couldn't put that, you couldn't quantify that in a dollar amount. My presence and helping her, kind of look at her life in a different view and put things together, and us having a healthy relationship as a family. That's been more of my experience. So early
Mm-hmm.
on, struggle. As I got older, I can't say there's off top truly that there's anything that I don't feel vulnerable enough to not have this conversation with my wife about. Like I'll tell her on the job, like, babe, I'm struggling mentally right now because I see this, I feel that, like, where I come from, this is how something is addressed. I don't have space to do that in corporate America or whatever the case is. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll say that. And she's like, hey, we're gonna do what we gotta do. I got your back, boy, like we're good. So that type of environment is comfortable. That's a safe space for me to be able to reveal all. I'm not pressured, to have to ever feel like I need to step outside and get something that I'm not getting, from my wife.
Whew, you said about four things. I'm like, okay, you
You
talked
said
about
deep.
safe.
You said deep.
Yep, we're going deep. So you have that connection. You have a safe space. Like you said, just okay. I'm like, where do we go with this? So let's just jump right into safe space then, real quick,
Okay.
and then not stepping outside because we are in the age of entanglement and we're trying to grow from entanglement to love and relationship and respect
Absolutely.
and honor and all of that kind of stuff. So, how can we make it safe? Because the Bible, because we have this whole thing, right? We got church, we got religion that tells us how to be this kind of thing and blah 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 blah. But from a man, like on the real,
Hmm.
how do you create that safe space? What's safe? What makes you feel safe?
What makes me feel safe is being able to express with my wife and my relationship what I'm feeling and what I need. I work with a lot of men. I've already said I specialize with men, and I'm not telling y'all who I work with and none of that because I don't want y'all trying to connect no dots. but but there's this mindset that men have, and maybe we'll get into this later in the conversation, that talks about intimacy and sex and so many different things, right?
Yeah, we can get
So
into it now. Let's talk about it. Come on.
all right, let me lay a framework, I guess. So a lot of men I've talked with and interacted with in the past who have had issues with infidelity in their relationships. Um, 9 times out of 10, it has nothing to do with the actual sexual intercourse. And I'm not at all justifying this and saying that this is good, because like you said, if we want healthy, whole marriages and relationships, we got to deal with that kind of stuff. A lot of times, because men equate intimacy to sex, and women don't necessarily see things like that. But men want to be able to feel comfortable and feel vulnerable. Um, if they're not getting that in a relationship, then they will tend to draw or be drawn outside and make connections with other women who they feel like might be easier to talk to, or not judging them, seem more like one of the fellas. It's safe, it feels comfortable. But as you know, one thing leads to another, and then before you know it, something that felt like a opportunity to just vent, something that a man felt like he couldn't do in his own relationship, or he was met with a lot of resistance or opposition or whatever, turns into this thing where, maybe he didn't even want to go there. But that, the thing about nature and how things happen, you know, that's what typically transpires. So what the whole part about the sex and the intimacy piece is, I've also heard men talk about, like, and you might see this on TV or see this out in media, that like, yo, that was just sex, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I really love my wife. That was just sex, But the reality is that there's a fine line between, you know, that whole intimacy piece. So sex is not the entire intimacy pie, but it's a nice slice of it, right? But intimacy is more of like a 5 course meal. So for the woman, the same is true. Sex is important, but if it's a 5 course meal, that's just one piece of it. It's all these other things that need to be connected. That men, like we said earlier, might not be primed and ready to do because it involves emotional connection and communication, being vulnerable, and being able to be trusted, and all these different things. So it's an interesting web of things.
Okay, these questions are coming. I want to get back to this five-course meal of intimacy in a second, but let me do the pause for this commercial break. You are listening to HOH 77.7. It's your girl Shuli with Speak It. I have my guest Mike Dangerfield, and we are talking about relationships tonight. We'll be back after this commercial break. Okay, with that said, we are back from the commercial break and we are going to continue.
Keep it
Mike
going.
Dangerfield, we're on HOH
Woo.
77.7. We've given the space for the commercial for the station to breathe. The questions are already popping up from the audience. We got going with the conversation. This second half is about talking with the ladies. Ladies, get your questions ready. Men, get your comments ready. So, real quick, talk about this five. So, for real, talk about this 5-part intimacy pie for men, because, like you said, sex and intimacy to women, like they're not exclusive in terms of, I mean, well, they're not the same.
Right.
To me, to us, they're mutually exclusive most part. So intimacy could be cuddling and we're
Right.
just having these conversations and that closeness.
Right.
But to men, you're saying a lot of times it's one and the same.
Yeah, it's one and the same. It's almost like comparing, sex being a dessert, right, as part of the 5 course meal, right? Which is,
Hmm.
we all like dessert. It feels good. It looks appealing, but dessert won't sustain you. If all you eat is cake and pie, then your like you're gonna be lacking in so many different areas. Your sweet tooth might be filled all the time, but you won't be a whole person. So the struggle is because boys and adolescent men often don't know, um, how to communicate, how to love, how to connect. The one thing that's instinctive and natural, that you almost don't have to learn. Your body almost shows you how to do what you need to do is sex. And so, when you like we said, when you have a boy who's in sports, especially at the high school, college level, and if we're gonna be honest, we know that it's almost made available to them, and that becomes the norm. That's the expectation of what a relationship really is.
Hmm.
Then as a young man or as a male, it becomes this thing where you say, "Oh, that was just sex." That's not, but it's been ingrained, and we got to undo that.
Whew, yeah. So we're talking safe and intimacy. So then, are we saying that when a man feels safe, then he's more likely to be intimate? And then what Paula is saying, Paula Sun from McKinney, Texas. Welcome, Paula. She was
Hey,
one of our
Paula.
guests last week. So she said safe to actually be okay with showing your vulnerability or pain. I think that's what you're saying, Paula, right? Is that what you're asking? So when you feel safe, you can feel intimate and you can be okay with showing your vulnerability and pain. Is that correct?
Are you
No, I'm
asking
asking
Paula?
you. Yeah, I'm
Oh,
asking
okay.
you. Go
Okay,
ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so when a person feels, when a man feels safe, it's much more easier to be, aware, and for his emotional intelligence to grow, and him to be able to connect with a woman, how she often needs to be connected. If
Mm,
he doesn't feel like he's supported, if he doesn't feel like, he has the respect, if he is going to be, met with opposition on every hand, then sex is something that he will do naturally, and it's a need, for a woman as well. So it'll happen, but that might be as far as it will go, and of course we
mm,
know dessert, again, it might make you feel good for a moment, but it's not going to give you any kind of nutritional value. It won't sustain you, so, yeah, it
that
would
part.
behoove it would behoove a woman, to do her best to try to help to create an environment. Remember, she has decades of a heads up, than men a lot of times, to help create an environment that's safe for a man to feel vulnerable, and showing pain, or just being vulnerable. That would help kind of give him some crash courses on how to be able to receive more of what intimacy is. He's got to be open to that.
Be open to it. We talked about grooming last week. That was a conversation I think that went on for a few minutes. So I'm going to ask this question as a follow up. When do you learn how to shift from how you've been raised to hide vulnerability? Maybe that'll help us with that question.
When do you
Yeah, because
learn?
that first part was that second question. That question was the follow up to this. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, so when did you learn how to shift from how you've been raised to hide vulnerability? As a man, that can be a little complicated. So I can tell you, from for me personally, it wasn't until I got outside of my comfortable environment, my usual environment, the hood, growing up in my area, and went to the military, and got a chance to see life from a different perspective, where it was all these different things I wasn't used to. And then I got to see, oh, well, the way I grew up seeing this, that's not the only way it can be done. In fact, that's not even the best way it can be done. There's some other people in different places that's, got a better handle on this. So I would just say, for a man, typically it's when he gets to that point to where he's reconciling what he's learned and what's been ingrained in him and what actually makes sense in the real world. And sometimes it's not until he gets into a relationship, you know, where he's seeing something different than what he's been exposed to that challenges him to say, wait, this is different than what I'm used to. Either I'm going to draw back and revert back to what I know and move around, or I'm going to stick around and say, hey, let me, learn a little bit more about how to deal with this, how to figure this thing out. And I would just
Okay.
say today's society, it's hard because people are so convenient. They want things now. They want things fast. And so if you're not committing to anything and not trying to stick around and work through some stuff and be patient, then this cycle just kind of perpetuates itself.
Whew. It really, really, really does. I've had conversations with guys, and again, the feedback that I've gotten, there were guys who didn't feel comfortable necessarily coming on to talk about their experiences, but they had a lot of feedback, and it was interesting, especially as it related to entanglements and situationships, like sometimes how they felt forced into relationships where they don't know how to say no. Can you talk a little bit about in that being vulnerability, being open, being honest as we kind of get into communication? What do you think makes it so difficult for a man to reject a woman or the notion of a thing that will allow them to kind of, I don't know,
Yeah.
I'd say string it along or ghost in those type of situations?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's a complex question, Shirley. I'll say this. So the hurt and the drama that happens for a man growing up, being shielded, and being forced to feel as though he doesn't ever have to be vulnerable. He can, and never have to show his emotion. He can, take it out on the field and all of that. Says that he never has an opportunity to be able to be faced with a situation where he does have to, allow not just logic but emotion to help him make a decision on what makes the most sense. So if avoidance has always been the thing, to keep you from doing something, what happens when you get in a situation that you can't avoid? What happens when there is no detour, when your back is against the wall and you got to deal with that thing head on? If you have never had some type of training or experience or some stair step instructions on this is what this looks like, this is how you need to address this if you face it, um, that's a tough situation. And so some men might feel like, man, I was set up. But the reality is, to be expected to be able to make wise decisions and have a well-rounded approach to addressing tough situations when you haven't had that experience, when you haven't been educated, where you don't know what that looks like, that's tough. That is really
So
tough.
how do we get men there? And I'm saying we, like I'm taking responsibility. Is it truly all a woman's responsibility, or is there something else? Like, how do we get here knowing that this has been the thing for all these years, but now we're coming into this understanding? How do we get it there?
Yeah. So that's a two-man lift in every situation, right? This is a two-man lift. That's not something you're trying to handle on your own. If it's going to be relationships, we're gonna have to approach relationships being honest. Society right now, I feel like it's set up for people to not be honest. Like, everybody got these masks on or whatever it is, physical masks, makeup, whatever the case is. Everybody's hiding behind stuff,
Something.
you know. Um, when you go into a relationship, whether it's dating or whatever the case is, the biggest and best thing you can do is just be honest from day one. Like, this is what I'm looking for. This is what the expectation is. This is what I've dealt with in the past. This is what I'm not willing to deal with. Those types of things. I'm not giving men a pass, but I feel like women have the upper hand a lot of times in interim relationships because they are better at being able to communicate what it is that they need. So instead of making these assumptions or instead of having this internal checklist and saying he's good in these areas, I can change him in these other areas, actually saying like, it seems like you got a good head on your shoulder. I don't know if you've been through enough stuff to really go with me where I'm trying to go. Let's talk about what that would look like. Is that something you
Woo.
want? And then let's do it. I mean, if men have been babied, so to speak, and I'm putting myself in that category, we've been babied in a sense growing up, then we got to grow up real fast if we're going to have a healthy relationship where both people are getting what they need out of it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
men are going to have to do the heavy lifting. Guess what? We were made to do it, I believe, but that's going to take some understanding and some patience on both sides.
Okay. Well, Tam has some questions. Thank you, ladies, for dropping your
Mhm.
questions. We're unpacking the conversation that we had in the beginning. So let's jump into what Tam said. She said, "What could be the reason why a man wouldn't want to open to his significant other? Should that be a sign for something?"
Yeah, shout out to Tam Tam. If you don't know, that's my wife. Hey, what's up, babe?
Oh, hey! Thank you,
Yeah,
Tam.
yeah. Thanks for joining in and asking that question. She's always good with the questions. So what could be a reason that a man wouldn't want to open up to his significant other? Should this be a sign for something? I'm gonna answer that second question first, babe, and then come back to the first one. Should that be a sign for something? Absolutely. If you have a man who's not willing to talk with his significant other about the things that are going on, that's definitely a sign. It could be a sign for many things. It could be a sign that he's going through some really, really tough things and he needs some support from his wife or his significant other. Or it could be that, he's doing some stuff he ain't got no business doing, and it's time for her to move around and she needs to pay attention to what's going on. Like, so many
Mm,
different things can be going on there. But some of the reasons that a man might not want to talk to his significant other about things is one, he's done something that he knows was wrong and that he knows, if it was done to him, he wouldn't be for it. So he doesn't necessarily want to damage or hurt her or the relationship or whatever the case is, but he also understands that he's at risk of losing something good if he's honest.
mm,
That's not justifying, what he's doing. That's not a pass, but that's one reason why. Another reason could be on the opposite end is that he feels like he has this pressure from his significant other to be flawless, to that he can't ever make a mistake, and so for him to have recognized that he did something that was wrong, and he's about to, be looked at as trash, went from the treasure to trash by his significant other, and he didn't want that to happen. That might cause him to you know, keep that inside. And again, we men already struggle with being able to express what it is that we're trying to say or what we're dealing with. So, we might be behind the curve on that.
okay. Okay. All right. So again, that was good. So we're going to talk about the vulnerability. Going back to that circling, it seems like this conversation, I thought it was going to go more on trust, but this is vulnerability. And if you want to tie that in too, how do you build a relationship of vulnerability and trust?
So I'll say it like this, and this is something that a lot of men can connect to. Maybe women not so much, but it'll make sense. So men are really into this, aggressive macho, kind of approach to thing. Football. One of my favorite movies was 300 back in the day. That was with the Spartans or whatever. They
Boo,
were
boo,
this,
boo.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You know what I'm saying? Um, the idea of vulnerability is this. They mastered it because what they did is they got to a point to where they learned how to cover themselves, their front and their back, right? So their position and strategy, they had less numbers when they went to war. Sometimes they devastated people because they had this core where there were no areas that were left open or exposed because they covered each other, right? So that's them working together. They trained, they understood, they did all this stuff. The same can be true in a relationship between a man and a woman. You build vulnerability by taking the time to train together, to communicate, to understand each other, to know what each other's strengths and weaknesses are, not to use them against each other, but to actually help support each other. And when you start to do that kind of stuff, then you become more and more open with each other. I can expose my heart to you because I know you're gonna protect it. And if I'm looking elsewhere, you got me covered, and vice versa. But if it's this, like divide where I'm always working to try to make sure I don't do something that's gonna set you off, then vulnerability is not even an option in that case.
Huh, going back to the safety. We're going through these questions. It's almost like a lightning round here because we want to unpack this. So again, Tam Tam is back. Hey girl. What disconnects a man intimately from his woman?
What disconnects a man intimately from his woman? So it's important first to establish an intimate connection. I think that's one of the things that is lacking in relationships, a true intimate connection. Remember, when you're in the beginning, you're dating, you're getting to know somebody. A man might look at intimacy as sex, and a woman might not understand that that's the whole pot for him, and so it's cool in the beginning, but then there's expectation for more. There may not be more for him, right? So first is making sure there's that connection, and then what can disconnect? A lot of times for a man, it's more mental. Physically, there's some things, some changes that, if a woman's not keeping herself up, men are visual, people. And because we connect sex to some degree to intimacy, that can be a turn off, that can cause some disconnect. But more often than not, it's going to be the disrespect. It's going to be the lack of giving, making that man feel like, he's important, that he's loved, that he's valued, he's going out there doing what he does, and he's making a difference in the lives of his woman, his family, or whatever the case is. When that becomes disconnected, or if that's something that's important, then that starts to cause an issue. Because guess what? If he's not getting the support from you, some other woman somewhere might be like, oh, you work hard. I see what you over there doing. Like, man, and all it takes is, again, an open conversation for a man to feel like he's getting something, some support mentally, or, some conversation or something without the fear
That
of the judgment. And that
mm.
can turn into something, right?
So communication. So are you saying that, so let me get clear, that men are not afraid to communicate, that they do talk, but it has to be within this feeling safe and not feeling judged. So like this level of openness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I tell you that, the idea of men being afraid to talk, or, coming to therapy is not for them. I have some clients in some situations where, like, I don't even have to ask a question. It's like, man, Mike, I was waiting on this opportunity because, this is what's going on. Like, they can, even if they don't know how to eloquently get it out, they will get it out and make it clear. If they have to draw some hieroglyphics, or, they're going to paint a picture for you. Now, them feeling comfortable enough to do that is one thing. Um,
Hmm.
I'm not tied to, I don't have to go home with these men. Like, I'm not connected to them in any kind of way. They're not responsible for my livelihood, and so there's some connections that happen when it's at home. And, they
Yeah.
feel like they don't have the safe space to be able to do this without being judged and looked at as weak, or, whatever the case is, then they're less likely to do it.
So are there other things that foster a breakdown in communication with men and women?
Um, yeah, yeah. If if the conversation in a relationship is hinged on just, how was your day? Oh, it was good. It was bad, or whatever the case is. Just routine conversation, and it's never us being able to talk about tough stuff. And
Hmm.
at the end of those conversations, feel like, man, I'm glad I had that conversation with you. Like, I'm glad you listened to me. I feel so much better for getting that off my chest. If that doesn't happen, not just for the woman, but for the man as well, then you're almost setting up an environment where, you know, there's just going to be the surface level interaction, not just communication, but interaction altogether. So that's one thing for sure that fosters a breakdown. I think we said earlier, respect is another thing. So
Okay.
A man wants to be respected. And so along those lines is this idea of manhood, Shuli. So manhood, you'll see a lot of conversations, man versus male, and men are really talking about this stuff now, what a man looks like versus what a male is and all that. But the thing is, there is no true, real, concrete definition for manhood, right? So I'm a Christian, and most at my core, it's my spiritual beliefs that drive who I am, right? The Bible's kind of clear on, what a man looks like, what he does, and all those kind of things. But in this society, the Bible is kind of it's a what you should do book, but not necessarily a how to book, right?
Oh,
So,
yep.
so with that said, you have the flexibility. Just because culture has said, decades and decades ago that a man looks like this, doesn't mean that that's true now. And so, if a man is already struggling with trying to understand what manhood is, because what he was taught or what he saw growing up is totally different than what he's seeing as an adult, right? For a woman to suggest in any form or fashion that he's not being a man based on his actions or what he's saying or what he's doing, he's gonna struggle with that.
Okay.
So being able to understand what a man is not is probably an easier approach to take than trying to just define manhood. So
Ah,
does
what?
that make sense? Those some triggers, some
Yeah. Ooh, trigger.
unintentional triggers, right?
Okay. So real quick, I'm going to
Mhm.
come back around to that and then we'll get ready to close. The time always goes so fast.
Yeah,
Paula
yeah.
says, "Why is it so easy for a man to fall into that was just sex explanation?"
I almost feel like that's a go-to line. And again, it goes back to the fact that they understand that what they did was wrong. However, they may not feel like they have what they need in the relationship, the present relationship with their spouse or their partner, to feel vulnerable enough to say what it is that they're not getting. And I'm not justifying that there's ever just casual sex. Like I will never, like I could never have this conversation ever with my wife. That's not even on my mind because that's not an option. If I want to maintain a healthy marriage, um, the thing is though, because sex for men again is something that's not, it's almost a thing, when it has been done, especially for a person who is, that's been the core construct of a relationship. That's just what it is. It's not the entire relationship. So for a man to say it was just sex, in his mind he's saying, but I still love you, because with you it's not just sex. It's, I'm going to work, I'm paying the bills, we got the kids, like we taking vacations, we taking trips, and
The
you're not,
provider word too.
right, I'm providing and you're not giving me sex. And so the justification sometimes is because that's so important and that's not happening for the man, that he goes and gets it elsewhere. That's
But
that's a
what if
very,
what if she is giving him sex?
if she is giving him sex, and there's something, to me there's something else that's going on. There's a unmet need that's not being addressed, and that would only come out with communication. I would then try to understand what is it that you're getting from this other person that was just sex, that you're not getting from your spouse or your partner, for you to feel like that was okay, or that's justifiable. Like your
Yeah.
partner should understand that that was just sex.
Where can they find you?
Oh, so you can find me online, www.allintherapy.net. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, m_danger the helper. That's all one word. Where else? Heal underscore thy mentality, or healthy mentality. That's something that I'm really trying to push, for men, because we need it. Like, it's not a matter of snitching. It's not a matter of giving a game. This is a matter of us, man. If we're going to be healthy, not just strong, if we're going to be healthy, like, we got to talk about some of this stuff. If you don't feel comfortable or confident enough to be able to talk about this with the people who matter most to you right now, then start by coming and having a safe space to do that, so that you can get to a point to where you deal with that. So
That's good
yeah,
stuff.
I'm available.
That
Easy. Google me.
he's around. He's on the flyer. Okay,
Google
so
me.
as we
Yeah.
get ready to get out of here, real quick, you mentioned it's easier to talk about what a man is not, to approach it from that perspective. Can you run it down real quickly, like so that is very clear, so that'll help us as women, and then for men to be like, okay, let's look in the mirror. What is not a man?
What is not a man? A person who, at the onset of a relationship, says, "This is going to be what it is." Like, I'm not into you, but we can kick it, or whatever the case is. We can have casual relationship entanglement. That's not a man. A man is not someone who is going to take you out of your comfortable environment with all your people and all your family and all your supports, move you somewhere else, just so that he can have, this controlling relationship, this power control issue type thing. That's not what men do. A man is not somebody who is not going to have some drive to go and have um, success in some form or fashion in his life. He's going to be goal oriented. He's going to be driven. He's going to show that he can do something. A man is not going to sit back and make an excuse why it's easier for him to just sponge off of you and pull from you, than to go out there and try to get it together himself. A man is not going to blame a woman for all the things that he's struggling with, right? Um, she's not going to be the reason and always be the excuse why he can't succeed or why the relationship is not thriving or whatever the case is. What else? What else is a man is not? Um, a man is not a person who is going to be all about himself. Just always him, not at least willing to put his wife or partner, I won't even say on a first, at least on an equal level. If it's always him, the head, and like, I'll come to you when I need you, kind of thing. Like, that's not a man. That's not what a man does. Man doesn't provoke. Of course, the spiritual piece of things don't provoke. His children. Is not abusive. Loves, is considerate. Like, all those things are things that we can look at and identify. Yeah, that's not a man, and I see that. I don't even want to open the door to invite this person into my space. As women say, I'm gonna protect my peace. Right? You gotta protect
Mm-hmm.
your peace.
Amen to protecting the peace. So Tam says, we are so hard on our men. They have some real challenges and hurts that they are dealing with. We expect more from them than we expect from God sometimes. Woo. And I thank you for that. With that, which is why I wanted to have a different type of conversation. I didn't want to have a go at the man, let's talk, and like I wanted to have this heart to heart. Let's just kind of put some things out there that can help us all to be better. I think we have accomplished this as much as we could in this short amount of time. This is a
Yeah,
conversation that continues. I'll let my audience speak to me and tell me what they want to hear more about. There's so much
absolutely, absolutely.
to this. There's so many levels. We know how to find you. I thank you so much for coming on and shedding light on this and sharing your heart with us tonight.
Absolutely, absolutely. Appreciate the platform to be able to do it, Shirley.
Yes. And with that said, I thank you all for tuning in the West African proverb ashe, or the word ashe, which means to speak a thing into existence or to say amen or to agree. The words have power. Go out, share your experiences, share your stories. That's how we just connect with one another, and we can bring about change in this world. We can bring about change in our relationships. And until next time, speak it. Be blessed and be well.
Yeah. Peace.